that would be great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Zaira Castagnano. If we haven't met before, I'm the head of exhibitions and curatorial projects here at Art League. I've been here just about 6 months now, so rounded off half a year. And I'm joined with Sophie Yasekura. She is the chair of our Artist Advisory Board who oversees the selection process and the open call. So if you want to say a little bit about yourself.
Cool, thank you. Hi everyone, thank you so much for being here. Like Sarah said, I'm the president chair of the Artist Advisory Board. This is my second year on the board. So I've been through this, I've done the review process before. I've also worked with Art League Houston on a number of things, including most recently the installations project, where we did 11 public art pieces in collaboration with the City of Houston, which was so much fun, even though it was mid-pandemic. Yeah, I'm excited to get into it today, so let's roll.
So here's just an overview of what we're going to discuss today. We're just going to talk a bit about Art League, the open call timeline, the proposal review criteria, gallery descriptions, proposal requirements, submission process, review process, and then answer any questions that y'all may have. Our ultimate goal for this info session is just to answer any questions that you may have about the open call process. That way you feel ready to submit a proposal, because we're so excited to see what y'all have in mind for these spaces. But yeah, if there's a pressing question, feel free to raise your hand and we'll answer it. Otherwise, it may be answered later on in the presentation, so maybe saving your question for the end might be best. But just to talk a little bit about Art League and who we are, our mission and our history dictates what our exhibitions are about. So the mission of Art League Houston is to connect the community through diverse, dynamic, and creative experiences that bring people together to see, make, and talk about contemporary visual art. Art League has 3 different branches. We have our exhibitions, and then there's educational and community engagement. So we have weekly classes that happen here in our 3 classrooms right behind you. And then we have various community engagement programs that we have. And one of our main focuses for this year is just connecting all 3 of them together and creating more dialogue between the branches, since in the past they've been kind of separated. So when we're looking at the proposals, that's something that we do keep in mind. This is Art League's 75th year, so we are thrilled to be celebrating that. We started off as a traditional art league, so it's membership-based. It was a way for artists to show their art and create community within Houston. And throughout the years, we've just progressively changed what an art league is and does. And so that's kind of at the core of who we are and what we do. Just to go over some important dates, we will be accepting submissions from September 1st through November 30th. The deadline is at 11:59 p.m. and we don't plan on extending that, so please make sure that your applications are in by then. We accept submissions through a program called Submittable. I've used it before in past jobs, and it's really user-friendly compared to some of the other programs out there. The deadline to submit a question with a guaranteed reply is November 10th, and that's just because that gives me ample time to review it, find an answer if I need to, and whatnot. Anything submitted past that, I can't promise that I'll get to it in time, so just keep that in mind. The review process, which will be led by our Artist Advisory Board, will be through December through February, with the goal of notifying artists by the end of February. And the dates for the exhibitions the open call is for, we break it down into semesters essentially. So we have our winter exhibitions, our spring exhibitions, and our summer exhibitions. If you want to make note in your proposal if one of these dates works better than the other, that's a good thing to know. For example, we have a lot of MFA applicants applying, and so if they're graduating in the spring, then realistically doing an exhibition at that time is not a great idea sometimes, just because you have a lot of things to juggle. And so maybe just saying summer exhibitions would work better or something like that. It was really weird to go in my calendar and look at dates in 2025 because that's just really crazy to me. But yeah, just to give you a view of what to look forward to in the next couple of months. Do you want to talk a little bit about the...
Absolutely. So some proposal review criteria. So like we said, the Artist Advisory Board will be the body reading over these proposals, and we will consider proposals by local, regional, national, and international. So nationality or place where you live doesn't really matter here. Emerging and established artists, and also curators in all media. So at this point, super open. Artworks and projects that have not been previously shown in Houston, that's pretty important. Clarity and articulation of a central idea. Strong artistic quality, artworks and projects that address social, political, and cultural issues relevant to the local community. Relevancy to current dialogues and contemporary art. Opportunities for compelling ancillary programming, such as performances, films, lectures, panel discussions, roundtables. That could be a good thing to note if you have somebody that you have collaborated with, or you just have an idea. Adding a note about a potential program could be really helpful for kind of sparking the imagination of the reviewers about other ones as well. Availability of curator and artist to play an integral role in execution and exhibition of events. So if you say, like, I can install and then you will not see me again, that could be a pretty big problem. And then platform artists and curators who reflect the local community. One thing I will say is something that kind of falls by the wayside often in these reviews is the clarity and articulation of a central idea. Make sure that you have like a sharp central idea, and also that you really communicate what it's going to look like in the space. It can be super easy to get wrapped up in the expansiveness of your concept or trying to connect it to all of the potential relevant conversations, which is great and wonderful, and we're sure that your work does that, but really make sure to like show focus and intention in a central idea, strong central idea. Think about what your reviewer is going to be taking away from that. Can they remember what your work is after having read it once? Or are they kind of confused by the cloud of ideas? They don't have a lot of time because there are so many applicants. So really make sure that you highlight that central idea and be really sharp about it. Yeah?
My question is, it concerns the first bullet. I submitted my series category, which I think in 2020, March 2020, but it got interrupted by what it means of the pandemic. So even though I've shown it, I do want to show it again eventually once I add more images to the series, so the stats still.
That's something we can talk about more in depth later, but if like part of your project has been seen, I don't think that that's really an issue. Really making clear like what is going to be different about the presentation at Art League or your proposed presentation at Art League would be the key thing there. Yeah.
And then, so like I said, we will be accepting proposals through Submittable. I included screenshots, but they were really bad quality once I pulled them up in the presentation, so I'll just screen share right now. So this is submittable. Once you will have to make a login to be able to apply. So once you do that, this is what it looks like. This is not open right now, so you won't be able to see it if you look for it. The submission process, once you go in, it will provide pretty much everything that we're talking about today. So that's all this text, just for you to reference again. And then we'll go over in depth the submission requirements in a second. And then just so you have a visual, this is what the application looks like. So I'll ask you what space you're interested in, the proposal, the working budget, artist bio, CV, images, video links if applicable. And then once you're done, you get to submit.
Please double and triple check that you've actually uploaded everything. It would just really be terrible to get a proposal that, like, I don't know, the PDF only uploaded one page or something like that. So yeah, just.
Before we go too in depth about the requirements, I wanted to go through, so these links lead to these pages. It's on our website, so it's for you to see. If you haven't been here before, we have 3 gallery spaces. So we are sitting currently in our main gallery space. It's about 1,200 square feet. We are a WAGE certified organization, and if you're not familiar with WAGE, they're an organization in New York that keeps organizations in check. So you, as an organization, we have to meet certain criteria to be certified each year. And what that means is that we not only provide the budget for production of the show, we also give a stipend to our artists for the work that they're doing outside of the actual show. So when in terms of like writing your artist statement or your exhibition statement, doing an artist talk, the work that it takes to do installation if you're doing that hands-on, the emails that I have to send back and forth with artists. So as an organization, we really value our artists, and we want to make sure that that work is not only seen, but also just rewarded as well, because it is work. And yeah, so that's a little bit about that. Here on this page, you'll find specific measurements that you can reference when you're submitting a proposal. So it goes pretty in depth with just the size of the walls, where outlets are, where lighting fixtures are. That way you can get real in depth with your proposal. And then at the bottom of the page, we have previous examples of work. That way you can reference what's been done in the space. And this looks a little bit different, as you can tell. We have had some renovations. So in terms of basing it off of, I would use the one with the measurements and not this one, since it's a little outdated. The front gallery, it's around 600 square feet. The artist stipend is 1,500 on top of the production budget. Again, you'll have all the specifications here and examples at the bottom. And our other space is our hallway. It's right down there. It's around 200 square feet, and then the artist stipend for that is 600. So all these shows tend to open on the same day. We do that just because there tends to be larger audiences. It's just a greater turnout for all artists involved. And typically we do the artist talk the following day after the opening reception. We may be changing that in the future, so it's not included in this presentation, but for right now, that's how we do things. And we also have a sculpture garden. We're not accepting proposals for that this time around, just because we're rethinking about the way we use the space, because of the crazy climate, we've realized that it's for work to withstand the climate, it's just going to need a larger budget and more time just to think about it, more time to install, and so we'll be doing an open call for that later on once we figure out the schedule and everything. But yeah, back to the presentation. Let's go. That's the really bad screenshot I was talking about. Cool. So as we're presenting these requirements, we're also going to use an example. The artist who previously had a show here before this exhibition, their name is Ian Gerson, and their work was successfully accepted throughout last year's open call. So we'll be putting it in juxtaposition with the requirements we're asking for, just so y'all have a good idea of what a successful application looked like. So with the proposal, it's just a good overview of what you're envisioning for the space, what you want to present, and any details included in it. Yeah. There's a couple of pages with Ian's proposal, so we won't read it. This whole packet will be available online for y'all to reference, so don't worry about writing anything down.
Sure. There are some really beautifully specific points in Ian's proposal that I just want to draw your attention to. So opening sentence, what the space that Ian wanted is front and center. It didn't end up being in the front gallery, but knowing that there was vision there was super important. And then a new series of 5 body scale weavings. That is a ton of precise information right up front. Beautiful. You could stop there and still have a vision in your head of what it was going to look like. Of course, there's more wonderful detail as you go on, but I think that that's really good. And then we get information about the materials right after that. Even though we don't know exactly what they're going to be, the kind of conceptual weight of the materials is in that sentence.
It talks a little bit about Ian's essence as a artist, so diving a little bit, even though they go into more detail about it in the bio, they do include their essentially a mini artist statement within the first paragraph as well. Also talking about why the front gallery spoke to them and why they selected that space for this specific exhibition. And also sharing some previous, second paragraph, it kind of goes into a CV or a resume, talking a little bit about previous examples of the specific work shown and how this exhibition, while working with the same media and ideas, is different from the previous 2 shows, which were in the Houston, Galveston area.
Again, we have a first sentence that is wonderfully descriptive of what the viewer will see. So Ian is clearly thinking about that actual space as opposed to some generic room, which the reviewers like to see. We like to know that you are thinking about Art League. I know that that's not always possible, and that this kind of detail does involve a lot of work. So not super necessary, but definitely helpful. If you're even thinking about a particular part of the architecture, it is good to include that. Yeah, don't omit those specific details. I would pick those over more general ones.
And we're open till I think 9:30 tonight or something, 10. So feel free to stick around afterwards, take a photo. If you haven't seen the front gallery, you're more than welcome to check out the space. The front gallery has really tall ceilings. It's very airy, whereas this is very closed off in a sense. It is a bigger space, so each space has its perks and whatnot. So just being aware of which space you're applying for. Totally.
So I have a question. Like,
Yeah.
the show was actually in this space. So like, how does it change? Like, if you looked at this and it was proposed for another gallery in sunlight, and then he changed his mind and like y'all suggested that he move into the larger space?
Yeah, so there's like a variety of like logistical reasons for that. Sometimes there are shows that are really strong that we all want to do, and maybe like more of them were in the front gallery, and we were like, we need to move one, and Ian's worked in here. That's like a conversation kind of after the proposal. And I think that there is an option to list an alternate space. So I don't think that you can really go into detail in that part of the application, but when you let us know like what it is about the architecture of the space that draws you to it, that helps us think, like, okay, so what is essential about the space, or could it work somewhere else?
Can I just quickly ask another question, just came to mind? How often do you give the space that the artist requests if they are specific about the space? Is that something that happens more often than not, or does it usually end up being sort of a more collaborative choice between the artist and you guys here at Reapplying to sort of like move ideas around these three spaces? Is that usually the way to sort of like, what's that sort of look like for you guys?
Yeah, so one of the things, so I will say in Ian's application, they did mark that they were flexible with the space.
Yeah.
So while they were presenting for the front gallery, there was a reference to being open to being in the main gallery. It really depends on the applications we receive. We try to do our best to accommodate everyone, but we also want to curate the shows so they have a great dialogue between each other. So if there's two exhibitors that we think would be really great, but they both applied, or would be great together, but then they both applied to the front gallery or the main gallery, then we'll have that dialogue, that's another step that we've added in the review process that hasn't always been there, is that between like the first stage and what was typically the last stage, we'll have the opportunity for, even though I don't necessarily have voting power in the open call process, because I will be working directly with the artists in the future, I'll be scheduling essentially interviews with the finalists to go over, to flesh out any questions that the review board may have had, or to present the idea of what something about your work just felt like it would be really great in the main gallery versus the front gallery, just because I'm really familiar with the space in terms of like turning exhibitions over and whatnot. So that's just something that we'll include in the review process, is the opportunity for me to meet with the artists before they're officially selected, to just go over any questions that the Artist Advisory Board had, and for me to just clarify that way. Everyone's on the same page. I don't know. It just depends. Yeah, for sure.
If you don't feel like your work would work in any but a particular space, there's definitely room to say that. You can say like, this really only works for this one space, and I don't think that will be points against.
Yeah, and I will say with Ian's work, it did end up working really well in this space, just because traditionally his work was presented right up against the wall. But with it being in this space, we suspended the pieces from the ceiling, so there is some space between the work itself and the wall. So we got to play a lot with the shadows and control the lighting to emphasize that. And also the AC makes the ceiling shake sometimes, and that actually played in favor with the work, since there's a lot of movement. There's a reflective quality of some of his work, so it was shimmering. It was So that really, it added a certain aspect of life to it that wouldn't necessarily have existed in the front gallery, even though the high ceilings are amazing. In this space, it had a different quality to it. And the last part of their proposal, they make references to artists that have inspired them and where they're pulling some of this inspiration from, which is also a great visual for the reviewing panel to have.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ian went into a lot of detail here, which is wonderful and great. I don't think you have to have this, but it is great info for your reviewers.
Another note to make is that they mentioned that they were going to create a publication to go along with the exhibition. We ended up having a little end of or closing reception publication release party. We had a karaoke DJ here. It was a good time. So that's just another example of an event that we were able to have on top of the exhibition itself. So anytime you can include some sort of community engagement aspect to your exhibition proposal, we love to see it. Cool. And we use the working budget as on the other end of things. We use the working budget to create our yearly budget. So we try to, as long as it's within reason, we try to support that full production cost that is presented. But be aware that we do use this later on. And so if you come to us if your work is accepted and you're like, hey, I actually need an extra $1,000 for X, Y, and Z, we won't always be able to meet that request. So try to make it as thorough as possible. And so things that are included, if people are applying from out of state, out of country, out of the city, you're able to include travel, lodging, shipping, supplies, installation. Some people paint the walls to go with their exhibition, so that would be a cost to include. If you know that your work is installation based and you're going to need extra hands, this is the opportunity to include a line in the budget for an additional prep. We do have a prep on hand for installation and de-installation, but keep in mind that we are installing 3 to 4 shows at the same time, so that prep's not dedicated to you. It's kind of whoever needs the help and how complicated the whole process is. So 3 people have a complicated install, we're definitely going to need extra hands. That's why we need it included in this budget. Again, the screenshot is really bad, so I'll pull it up here. This is what Ian's budget looked like, because their work is created from found material that they gathered throughout their Galveston residency and other various times they were down there. There wasn't necessarily a material cost needed in this proposal, so instead most of the budget was dedicated to that publication that was created for the exhibition. It was a pretty complicated install, so they included that line here. They needed extra photography and documentation for that publication, so that's smart there, even though we do take just standard installation photos as well as open reception and artist talk photos. So that's not always needed unless there's a specific requirement you're looking for. So I feel like this is a different budget submission than we typically see, but we've seen people put in costs for canvases, for framing, if there's a complicated element to the install, then we see that. We do have a set amount of projectors and TV screens that we have on hand, but I would say include it just in case. If we have it, then we'll make note of it and we'll just like X that out in the budget in the long run. But feel free to get as in detail with that as you want.
Yeah. And I think one good thing about Ian's proposal as well is the note of any materials you think you can get in kind. That's always helpful. And like Art League has a wonderful network of other institutions and other like kinds of contractors that if the person you were thinking of for in kind fell through, that's something that Art League could help with.
Yeah, and we have like a set amount of pedestals and things like that, but if your work requires 50 pedestals, maybe include that. Right? Like if it's just an amount that we may not have, just note it. That is an example of the publication that Ian released with the exhibition, just as a visual. And then the artist paragraph biography, it's kind of a combination of an artist's statement and a bio. So it's just an opportunity to let the reviewer know who you are, what drives you to make work.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this one's pretty self-explanatory. Ian, I mean, we can go to the next one. I mean, Ian had shown a lot, so there's a lot here, but don't let that intimidate you. If you don't have that, that's okay. Just, talk about yourself. And also don't feel pressure to fill every single word of the 500. You don't have to. Just, speak what's relevant to you.
Yeah, Art League is committed to showing work by artists in the beginning of their career and the middle stages of their career, and Ian just so happened to have a lot of experience and has been around in the art scene for a while, and that's why it's a little bit more, you see a lot of residencies and exhibitions and education there, but that's not necessarily why Ian was selected. It's just, like I said, it's an opportunity to pitch yourself to the reviewer and share a little bit about yourself that they wouldn't see anywhere else in the proposal. And then I believe we have 2 more requirements. One of them is a CV. I would say this may be the least important part of the application, to be honest.
Please submit it though.
Yeah, submit it, but it's, a CV is essentially a resume of your artistic background, artistic history. It gives the reviewer an idea of, how much support you may need throughout your exhibition process. For instance, if this is your first solo exhibition, super exciting. We want to make sure that we spend a little bit more time with you just so you're able to know what to expect throughout the whole process.
Yeah. And I think for reviewers also that may be unsure about what your work is like, or just getting a full picture of your CV, they could potentially look up exhibitions that you've been in or artists that you collaborated with. So that can be important in terms of a reviewer wanting some more context.
And this is just a visual of what Ian's CV looked like. So they've included their education, any awards that they've been granted, exhibition history, as well as Ian also is a performance artist, so they've included that information, group exhibitions, and then publications that they've been a part of. And then the last thing that we ask for are artwork examples. This is your opportunity to submit visuals to your application. So you're allowed to submit 10 digital images. If your work is more video or performance-based, there's an option to submit that, whether in links or uploading the video itself. So these 7 right here are...
Oh, sorry. I would like to know if this is a place where you might submit visual elements or visual aids to our proposal. For instance, say like the blueprints to a site-specific sculpture, which include like more detailed breakdown of like the specific dimensions and materials that we might use, especially if we're submitting something that we would have no intention of making unless we actually were accepted for the proposal.
Yeah, for sure.
This is definitely the place.
Some artists actually, like, they'll use a blank template of they'll take photos of the walls when they're blank and then Photoshop their work onto the walls. That way there's this even deeper visual understanding of what they foresee for the space. That's extra. Yeah, we don't always see that. We rarely see that, but some artists do take it that way just because they're really...
If the work is unrealized, then I would say submit images of work that is realized and say this is not what it's going to be, but it will be like this. And then any sort of sketch that you can give us, a technical or more impressionistic sketch,
Yes.
That would be good.
Yeah, like I was saying, Ian's work, these 7 are specific pieces that they've created in the past, and then these 3 are installation photos from the Galveston Artist Residency that they referenced earlier on within the project. So without a doubt, the reviewers saw this, they knew kind of what to expect. They can get a visualization of work that Ian's done before, and these photos are from Ian's exhibition here, so we can kind of see the resemblance of the images they proposed versus the actual final product of the proposal.
And the differences between this one and then the actual install shots. The reviewer knew that there would be a difference in terms of like the density of objects based on the text that Ian gave us, which was 5 body-sized hanging panels.
Yeah. So that kind of goes over all the requirements that are asked of you during the application process. Before we move on to the review process, are there any specific questions regarding what we just went over? I know that was a lot of information, but just want to make sure. Cool, awesome.
Oh, did you have something?
Well, I want to make a quick comment about like accessibility. I'm sure there is a limit to what we are, I think that when we're considering doing manipulating spaces, I'm sure you guys are probably very aware and want to help us with making our work as accessible as possible.
Yeah.
To anybody who may want to view it. And I was just thinking, like, do you guys have a set of guidelines that you typically follow, or like a set of references maybe for something like that? Not just something that's to be immediately invested in great detail right now.
What kind of accessibility are you talking about?
So like wheelchair accessibility,
Sure.
fire code, stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Well, we would love for your work to be within the fire code. that would be super.
But is there like a document that you guys already have that has information pertaining to that? Or is that
I think if we got a proposal that we had accessibility concerns about, we would flag them, and that would be something we would bring up with each individual artist. It is certainly not an issue with most work. In of course, Ian's photos of the Galveston artist residency, that might have come up, and like, you know, for wheelchair users wanting to navigate the space. But that normally does not come up.
Okay.
Yeah, but if you're really interested in it, I have the document that we use as a guide, and you're more than I'll get your contact information later, and then I can send it over to you. For instance, you'll notice that our shelving that's like used to hold those earrings up, those are at a certain height that's considered ADA accessible, and so when we do have shelving, it tends to be lower rather than higher, and like things like that. But that's in the nitpicky, you don't have to include that in your proposal necessarily. That's just decisions that we kind of like automatically make for that reasoning, because we do want our exhibitions to be accessible as possible.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. Any other questions? Cool. Yeah, so just to give some transparency to the review process, it happens in 3 stages. Sometimes in the past it's been done in 2, but we've included, like I said, that extra step in the middle. But since you've been through it before, why don't you lead this one?
Sure. So we divide the board into 3 groups. There's 9 of us?
10.
10.
So you're
because I'm on
heading.
Right. There's 10 of us.
Yeah.
And I will read all of them, and then everybody else will read a third of them. I think last year I did like 40 or something. And then Philip Pyle, our former board chair, read, I think, maybe 130 or something.
There's more than that. If there was just about 200 applications last
200.
year.
Okay,
Yeah.
so maybe I read closer to 60.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, it is random. We don't like divvy them up based on any sort of criteria. And then each board member is asked to go over each of those proposals and then rate them on a specific rubric that we have. I think there are going to be some tweaks to it. So do you have it?
Yeah, I can pull it up. Just to share last year's one, we are putting the finishing touches to our artist advisory board, just because there's a 2-year limit, and all the other 9 people met their 2-year limit. So we're starting with a very fresh new board. We're hoping to announce the board in the next month or so. So you'll have an idea of who's going to be looking over your application. But this is what the review form from last year looked like.
Yeah. So we got this like big yes, no, maybe. Most of them are like this is really to do like initial sorting. The yes, no, maybe here, like most people answer differently from each other, so that's like not the end all be all, of course. And there's a number associated with it that then the numbers get aggregated and like people score higher or lower. So the central idea of the proposal is clearly stated and articulated. This was one that I really struggled with in a lot of the proposals, which is why I really hammered it home in the presentation today. Strong artistic quality, social, political, cultural issues relevant to the community. Like all these criteria are each important. You don't have to hit every single one of them. I would encourage you not to do any sort of stretching that you feel like really doesn't fit your proposal. It is obvious when it happens. So yeah. Yeah.
And I will say, when these numbers are tallied up, when people vote, sometimes it's like people who, when the folks are reviewing it, thought would score higher, they find out that they didn't. And so there's an opportunity, like we'll go back here. There's an opportunity, the board convenes together. So the first step is done individually, and then the second stage is done in person. So the board gathers together when it's possible, and then they essentially present their favorite favorite applications to the rest of the board. So sometimes, like on my end, I'll tally up like the top 40 applications based off of the scores given, and then if someone on the board is like, well, my top one wasn't on there, they're still able to present that application to the group.
Yeah.
So
and people have made very strong cases for like lower scoring presentations before, so yeah.
So let's say an artist is made this time around. Do you encourage that artist to reapply, or do you also keep in mind their artworks maybe exhibited as curator yourself and as the advisory board leader or somebody
I think we would always encourage artists to reapply. Certainly, why not?
a lot of artists that were selected last time around, it was not their first time applying. So we'll get into the nitty gritty of numbers later, but the realness of it is that there are 9 slots available. So there's 3 galleries, 3 semesters open. With over 200 applications, you'll see later on the percentage of the acceptance rate that it has. And so just because there are times when there's wonderful, just amazing applications, and they're just not selected because like maybe it doesn't fit with the rest of the shows, because like I said, we want to create that deeper dialogue between the exhibitions. Or maybe the timing's not right. There's so many reasons why a great application isn't accepted, and it's not because it's not great, you know? So just keeping that in mind.
Mm-hmm. And you will get feedback.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
So in stage 2, that's kind of when the artist advisory board narrows it down to like the top 2-3 candidates for each spot. And then for stage 3, I'll take any questions that the artist advisory board has about any application. I'll do sort of an interview process with that artist just to get any clarification on those questions. And then I'll share it with the board. The board will then meet again and then make their final selections. Any questions? Yeah. So here's an idea of what was submitted last time around. There was 196 applications. Breaking it down to who's applying, most people apply from Texas. You don't have to submit this data, but it's fun when just visualizing where people are applying from and whatnot. So there's that huge chunk of no data right there.
Yeah.
But for the most part, people from Texas are applying, people from Houston are applying. A lot of the shows that we've exhibited in this past year are Houston-based artists. So, yeah. And then here's the percentage of acceptance that actually happens with each of the gallery spaces. As you'll see, 2%. Those are really small. Those are really small numbers based off of the folks that apply. So, again, if you don't get accepted the first time around, do keep in mind these percentages. Just because you're not accepted doesn't mean that we don't enjoy or like your artwork or don't find that it would make it would be great in this space. So, yeah. Okay. Any additional questions?
Or any parts of the process that you think we should elaborate on more, concerns?
Curators are actually encouraged to apply. So a curator can apply and So instead of like artist statement, it would be a curator statement, and it would just go into depth about the idea of the exhibition and the artists that they're interested in working in. So, yeah. Yeah, you'll have to just make that clarification in your proposal and share what value a curator would have bringing into it and what that collaboration looks like.
Yeah, I think on that particular topic, I would try to be like as specific as you could be about why a curator. I think that reviewers, that would initially raise a flag for viewers, and if you couldn't justify it, that might be a problem.
Yeah.
So, for the artists who are exhibited to go to space, is it our responsibility to, I guess, invite others to help us install, like, or are we allowed to, like,
Yeah, no, for sure. I work with preps all the time, so I have probably more knowledge than some folks may have, you know? So if you need an extra prep, like I said, we have one on hand. If you need a recommendation on someone else that I have worked with before and I know they do great work, I'm more than happy to share those resources with you. For instance, with Ian's show, Ian relied on his circle, just because they have other artist friends, other people who have worked in installation before, and so leaning on them to help. But I'll also be in the gallery helping. I'm very hands-on during the installation process. So like I said, if you're just imagining a really complicated install, more than happy to suggest. You'll see that in Ian's budget, they put down like X amount of hours. The average rate for install is usually like 25. It depends. Sometimes it's like 50 to like 15 is the range. I would say 25 is a good point to start at, just for us to have in mind.
And if you want to, like, before you submit, like, send what the work is going to be and, like, how much help do you think I'd need? That's something that can be thought through with you. Oh, sorry. Let's go this way.
If an artist's proposal is not accepted, can they request feedback from the board?
We'll give you feedback. Yeah. So part of the process for the board is to like pull together points of feedback. Sorry, thank you. Had your hand up?
Yeah, if we require a special design floor plan or something, are there resources to hire someone that can fabricate here, or does that mean it just happen completely offsite?
Yeah, so we have a father-son duo that does a lot of the just like building repairs that we need and whatnot, and just like they do odd projects for us, so we use them to build out pedestals if we need to. The smaller organizations in the area do lean on each other sometimes, so in the past we've asked the Craft Center if we could borrow pedestals before. So our first option is always going to see if we can pull together resources without spending it in the budget. But like I said, just noting it in your proposal, that way we have an idea of what we need to gather if it is accepted. So yeah.
I would request a quote for someone to build that, or like ask around and see what people think is a reasonable price for the thing you're imagining. And then like Ian did, make a note, you know, like if this can be found rather than fabricated, like we could reduce this cost. And then you had another one.
The first one to tell you.
Yeah.
One more question. Do you encourage other type of programming besides artist talk? I was thinking maybe an exhibition, maybe a workshop for the community.
Yeah. So So Art League, we've done it with Alexander Squire's exhibition in the hallway. We launched a program in between the education department and the exhibition department called Artists On-Site. So that's when we have the artists teach a free workshop to the community. That way visitors are not only able to get like a visual understanding of the work, but also a hands-on understanding. That way people viewing the work can get a deeper understanding of the work that they're seeing. So that is encouraged. Another example is that an upcoming artist, Marley Foster, they're going to be exhibiting outside, and their work is fabric-based. Half of the work is going to be created in these workshops. So they have 2 leading up and then 2 during. And so they're teaching quilting workshops that will be shown with the artwork once it's presented in December. So those are 2 examples. We love to see that type of inclusion in the proposal. So if you, obviously not every artist is a teacher, nor do they want to teach. So if that's not something you're interested in, again, like don't include it. But if you are really interested in community engagement, I encourage you to include it. Yeah.
Just make sure any materials you need to include those in your budget.
Yeah. So for instance, Marley had included an assistant for those workshops in the budget. Marley also was granted an Idea Fund grant. So they've been using that grant alongside with the budget that they provided to pay for all the materials, the labor, and things like that.
If you do plan on stacking funding like that, though, please disclose that to us, because if we think that there are going to be any problems with meeting grant requirements or things like that, we really need to know.
So I just wanted to clarify, since artist talks is something that everybody is doing, you're open to adding additional ways to engage the community.
Yes.
Right.
So an artist talk is required when you're accepted. And so for artists that are international artists, those artist talks happen on Zoom. We're flexible in ways that the artist talks happen. We've received feedback from recent exhibiting artists that doing it the night or the morning is like afternoon. The afternoon after is a lot to ask for the artist, especially if it's like a late install throughout the week and then big opening and then having to wake up the next day and do an artist talk isn't always ideal. We do it because some of the artists are visiting, so they're able to stay for install, opening, and then the artist talk all in one swoop. But since a lot of the artists we present are Houston-based artists, maybe giving that flexibility to those artists to do it at a different time.
Yeah. And we don't do them night of because that's really chaotic. They used to be night of. It's out of control.
And are there details about the artist talk, like the format, any of that stuff?
Yeah, those tend to be around 20 minutes. They're not always 20 minutes. They're 20 minutes with questions, you know? So we definitely want the artist to be prepared. We always suggest that the artist practice beforehand because 20 minutes is a really long time. And just practicing it beforehand. If an artist has never given an artist talk before, then I am more than happy to be that resource for an artist. I'm happy to sit through with them and like practice it and give any suggestions or critiques. So yeah, something that we can work collaboratively together if need be.
So you mentioned with the CV and using artistic history, and of course in Ian's example they had a lot of formal training.
Yeah.
But they also mentioned that it's a great space for people who are just starting.
For sure.
Like for example, since my first application and I'm kind of a self-taught artist. What do you recommend for a student or resume in that case?
I would just include your resume, and then make sure in your bio to just mention. So if you've taken any, like your resume would be a good place to say like any art classes that you've taken. But yeah, I don't think you need to. I think a reviewer would be really thrown off by like more narrative in a CV than in your like artist bio. I would stick with that in your artist bio. Yeah, so like if you were to turn the CV into something that's more like a story about yourself, I think that would really throw reviewers off, and they
So keep them separate.
keep them separate. Yeah.
And then in the CV, put things like I said, some art leads atmosphere.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't always have to be university type of stuff, you know. The internet is so strong these days, and there's a lot of free information, and universities are becoming more and more inaccessible. So any type of education, whether that's video, art league classes, things like that, totally acceptable. Any other questions? Yeah.
Do you have any materials that are just like a hard no, or I don't know, just thinking if you consider like
Anything that's a biohazard, unless it's like sealed correctly.
Well, but Angel did biohazardous stuff.
I read some emails.
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend. It would have to be so things like that, things that could be a hazard to folks. Like I said, we want to be as accessible as possible. We do have our healing art program that works with folks with disabilities, and so they meet here every Friday. If for some reason the material would cause them any harm or any possibility of that, we definitely, that would be
For sure.
a thumbs down on the application.
Yeah. I would just sort of like float your material with other people, and if they're like, in a gallery space, and they mean that in terms of like you're talking about like lava or like I don't know.
Yeah. Open flames, maybe not the best.
Right.
We don't want to set off any sprinkling issues.
Anything that could like permanently damage the building, anything that our healing art community would raise eyebrows at, because like that is part of Art League's mission is the healing art. So, and there are children that take art classes here too. So I don't know.
Another note that I would make is that if your work has sound to it, indicating whether you plan on having headphones nearby, and that's the way that people are consuming the sound. Just because, as you can see, our front desk is right there, so some things on a loop that's out in the open, then they're not going to be the happiest during the duration of the exhibition. So just keeping in mind our other staff. In the front gallery, we have second floor offices there, so it's open to them, they can hear things. So when possible, headphones are kind of the way we like to go, but if you feel really passionately about that sound being just open in the wild, then that we'll figure something out there. But yeah, just keeping that in mind, because we do want to be courteous to other teammates. But yeah.
I would say yes. As long as it's not like flowing out and flooding things, water's good.
Yeah.
Well, also like, I've seen examples of your work before. If the water is contained, that's fine. I think like also just like damp things, like mold would be something we really wanted to avoid.
Yes.
As far as community aspect of doing programming, is anyone ever done anything like market or anywhere?
Yeah.
Invitations to other artists to like
We,
share their work with theirs?
for sure. Yeah. So what we did for Ian's closing, because it was going to be a whole event, we were like, well, we should make it a whole event for all of our artists. That way they have the same opportunity. We collaborated with Canary, our next door neighbors at the coffee shop with it. So we closed off the whole front parking lot. In this room, we had the karaoke going on with the DJ and the publication release. So that was inside, away from the heat. Outside, we had David Delgado, who was exhibiting work in the hallway, C. Cam, who is exhibiting work in the front gallery, and Thomas Tran, who is exhibiting work on our platform project. Outside there, in a market-like sense, where they had a table, they were selling their own work, and then we also did an open call for vendors to apply and be there. So we had a food truck, we had an ice cream truck, we had people selling plants and tortillas and ceramics and things like that. So that's an opportunity. It was, we're actually planning on doing that every closing if possible. So we're doing it in a seasonal basis. We're always going to offer artists an opportunity to table those events, just because that's another way for artists to make money. When artists are vendoring outside, we don't handle any of the sales, so they're able to use their cash only or Venmo or card, whatever you do that's like out there, you know. Yeah, we just hired on a new member on the Art League team to run our community engagement program. So that's something we'll be collaborating on. They're still fresh. We don't want to bombard them with too much information. So eventually I'll transition over to them. We'll see how the Houston weather is and everything like that. But yeah, that's something we're definitely interested in. And also in terms of sales, when artists show work here, there are multiple ways of going about sales if you want to sell your work. So sometimes we give the artist the option to either we can direct sales to them, they handle it on their end, and we just point people towards their direction, or we can handle the sales ourselves. We automatically take, I think it's a 3% charge just because of the transaction fee that we have with Square, but other than that, artists get to keep the remainder of that sale, and we give the artist the option to donate a percentage if they wish to do so, because we understand some artists have a lot of opportunities to sell their work. Sometimes they're like doing really well off and they can afford to donate 50%. Great, fantastic, cool. But we also understand that some artists need the money and they can keep it if they want to. So that's just some more insight into the exhibition process of an acceptant applicant.
Yeah, I would recommend also looking through Art League's social media and website and like getting an idea for the breadth of programming that's happened here. Lots has happened, and it'll give you a sense for what is and is not the kind of thing that happens here. So it'll give you an idea of if you need to really justify a programming choice or not.
Yeah, and just more insight to accepted proposals as an artist whose proposal is accepted. I'll be working closely with them to create a press release, to create promotional materials, to just the ins and outs of the exhibition process. So if it is your first time doing an exhibition, don't worry, I'm here to hold your hand throughout the whole process if you want me to. So we're an artist-forward organization. We really let our artists take the lead, and then I support as needed. But yeah. Cool. Any last questions? You're always welcome to email me if any come up just before November 10th if you want an answer. Yeah.
That's just about questions about the process.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
Zyra will answer questions about the process until November 10th. There's a guaranteed answer. All of the submissions will be reviewed.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you submit, you will get a reply about your.
And the board won't even have access to the proposals until the cutoff date. So I'll be sending them their things to review in December. You'll notice that it's a longer period than we've done in the past, and that's because it's the holidays, and that's a lot of material to review. So we want to make sure that every application has the respectful amount of time to go over, and it's not just a whole rush process. So, yeah, no, for sure.
Do you have a question?
You said there was going to be a link for us to see the packet that you just.
Yes. So on our website, there is we have a whole page dedicated to the open call process. Not yet. So I'll be. We've recorded this whole conversation. This will be updated on there. You'll see that we have a webinar that's like 2 years old at this point. So we'll be replacing this with this current one, and I'll also include a link to the packet, to the presentation we've been referencing, and I'll make sure Ian's work is like clearly stated there and not a fuzzy screenshot. But yeah, any additional questions? Cool. Well, we're so grateful that you've joined us today, and I know it's a Wednesday and people have work and everything, so it's just really nice to have spent this past hour and a half with you guys, and really looking forward to your application. Good luck.
Thank you.